The late 15th century was a time of profound change in Europe. The Renaissance was flourishing, spreading new ideas rapidly. Europeans, eager to explore, dreamt of new trade routes to the east. The Silk Road was long, dangerous, and controlled by rival powers. This desire for exploration was driven by economic ambition, religious zeal, and a thirst for adventure. Little did they know, their voyages would reshape the world in complex and consequential ways. For centuries, the East held a special allure for Europeans, especially for its spices. Reaching these lands was fraught with challenges, making the journey long and expensive. The Ottoman Empire's control of key points along the Silk Road further complicated matters. This desire for a faster, safer route to the riches of the Orient fueled the age of exploration. Christopher Columbus stood out with an audacious vision to reach the East by sailing west. Despite numerous rejections, he secured funding from Spain's Queen Isabella I and King Ferdinand II. Driven by economic ambition and religious zeal, the Spanish monarch saw an opportunity in Columbus's proposal. Little did they know their investment would have far-reaching consequences. In August 1492, Columbus set sail with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. The voyage was long and perilous, with storms, dwindling supplies, and mounting fear among the crew. Despite hardships, Columbus remained resolute, driven by his unwavering belief in his mission. Just when their spirits were at their lowest, a sign of hope emerged on the distant horizon. On October 12, 1492, a lookout on the Pinta cried out, "Tierra! Tierra!" Land had been sighted. Columbus, believing he had reached the East Indies, named the inhabitants Indians. He had in fact landed on an island in the Bahamas, marking a turning point in human history. The encounter between Columbus and the indigenous peoples would have profound consequences. For Europe, it opened up a new frontier. For the indigenous peoples, it marked the beginning of a tragic chapter. Columbus's voyages revealed a vast new landmass, sparking a wave of exploration and colonization. European powers were eager to claim their share of the riches and opportunities this new continent offered. Explorers embarked on daring voyages to map the coastlines and seek passages to the Pacific Ocean. These missions were driven by ambition, curiosity, and a thirst for wealth and power. Spain emerged as the dominant force in the early exploration and colonization of the Americas. Their conquistadors, driven by religious zeal and a thirst for gold, toppled powerful empires and claimed vast territories. The Spanish sought to convert native populations to Christianity, often through forced conversions. This exploitation, coupled with European diseases, led to a devastating decline in indigenous populations. While Spain consolidated its empire, other European powers sought their own footholds. The French focused on the northern regions, establishing the fur trade as a lucrative activity. The English, driven by a desire for land and resources, persisted in their efforts to establish a permanent presence. Despite early setbacks, they laid the groundwork for the founding of Jamestown in 1607. The stage was set for a clash of empires and the birth of a new nation. In 1607, England planted its flag on the shores of Virginia, establishing Jamestown. The colonists, ill-prepared for the harsh realities, faced disease and malnutrition. The search for gold proved futile, and the reality of survival set in. Discontent simmered as the colonists struggled to build a life in this unforgiving land. The winter of 1609, known as the Starving Time, brought unimaginable hardship. The colonists, weakened by disease and malnutrition, faced dwindling supplies and bitter cold. Without strong leadership, the colony teetered on the brink of collapse, yet, even amidst the death and despair, a flicker of hope remained. While the English struggled, the Spanish had secured their presence further south. In 1565, Pedro Menéndez de Aviles established St. Augustine, the first permanent European settlement in the U.S., St. Augustine became a hub of Spanish activity, trade, and missionary work. The Spanish imposed their will on the native population, leading to a decline in the Timucua population. The arrival of Europeans triggered a clash of cultures with profound consequences. Initial encounters were marked by curiosity and tentative exchanges of goods and knowledge. However, misunderstandings and the growing hunger for land led to conflicts. As European settlements expanded, so did the pressure on Native American lands and resources. Section 1. Worlds Apart, Cultures in the Balance. The encounter between Europeans and Native Americans was a collision of vastly different worldviews, spiritual beliefs, and ways of life. The Europeans, steeped in the traditions of Christianity and the Renaissance, viewed the natural world as something to be tamed, controlled, and exploited for human benefit. Land, in their eyes, was a commodity to be owned, fenced off, and passed down through generations. Their concept of wealth revolved around the accumulation of material possessions, gold and silver, and the expansion of empires. The Native Americans, on the other hand, held a profoundly different perspective. They saw themselves as part of a vast web of life, interconnected with all living things, the plants, the animals, the rivers, and the mountains. The land was not something to be owned but rather a sacred gift, a source of sustenance and spiritual connection to be respected and preserved for future generations. Their concept of wealth revolved around balance. Balance with nature, balance within the community, and balance within themselves. These fundamental differences in worldview would have a profound impact on the relationship between the two groups. While early encounters were often marked by curiosity and a tentative exchange of goods and knowledge, the underlying tensions, the competing claims to land and resources, and the vast gulf in cultural understanding would eventually lead to conflict and tragedy. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also known as the Iroquois Confederacy or the Six Nations, stood as a powerful force in the face of European expansion. This alliance of six nations, the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora, emphasized diplomacy, consensus building, and respect for the natural world. Their governance, based on the Great Law of Peace, guided their interactions and maintained unity. The arrival of Europeans disrupted the balance of power. The Dutch established trading posts along the Hudson River. The Haudenosaunee engaged in trade, balancing European powers to maintain control. They traded furs for firearms and metal tools, enhancing their capabilities. This trade intensified competition and conflict among Native American groups. The story of Pocahontas, the daughter of Chief Powhatan, the paramount chief of the Powhatan Confederacy in Virginia, has become an enduring though often romanticized symbol of the complex and often tragic relationship between Europeans and Native Americans. When English colonists established Jamestown in 1607, they found themselves reliant on the goodwill of the Powhatan Confederacy for their survival. Pocahontas, whose real name was Matawaka, played a pivotal role in mediating between the English colonists and her people. According to English accounts, she intervened to save the life of Captain John Smith, a leader of the Jamestown colony, who had been captured by the Powhatan. Whether this event occurred as described by Smith is a matter of historical debate, but it highlights the precarious nature of the relationship between the two groups. For a time, a fragile peace prevailed, based on trade, diplomacy, and the marriage of Pocahontas to John Rolfe, an English colonist. This marriage, seen as a symbol of peace and cooperation, did little to ease the underlying tensions stemming from the English colonists' insatiable appetite for land and their disregard for Native American customs and beliefs. As more English settlers arrived, encroaching further onto Powhatan lands, conflicts erupted. The peace that Pocahontas had striven to maintain crumbled, leading to a series of bloody wars that would forever alter the landscape of Virginia and decimate the Powhatan population. In the Southwest, the Spanish encountered a very different cultural landscape. The Pueblo people, skilled farmers and artisans who had built elaborate villages and a thriving civilization centuries before the arrival of Europeans, had long endured Spanish attempts to suppress their traditional beliefs and ways of life. The Spanish, driven by a fervent desire to convert the Pueblo to Christianity, imposed their religion with a heavy hand, outlawing traditional ceremonies, destroying sacred objects, and forcing the Pueblo to adopt Christian practices. This cultural oppression, coupled with economic exploitation and a series of droughts and famines, ignited a firestorm of resentment among the Pueblo people. In 1680, under the leadership of a charismatic religious leader named Pope, the Pueblo people rose up in a coordinated revolt that would drive the Spanish out of New Mexico for over a decade. The Pueblo Revolt, a testament to the power of faith, resilience, and the enduring human spirit, was a desperate but ultimately successful attempt to reclaim their freedom, their culture, and their way of life. It stands as a stark reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, oppressed people will rise up to defend their beliefs, their identity, and their right to exist on their own terms. The legacy of the Pueblo Revolt continues to inspire generations of Native Americans and all those who seek to preserve cultural diversity and resist oppression. The voyages of Columbus and the subsequent wave of European exploration and colonization triggered an unprecedented exchange of plants, animals, diseases, and ideas between the eastern and western hemispheres. This biological and cultural interchange, known as the Columbian Exchange, had a profound and lasting impact on the world, transforming diets, reshaping landscapes, and altering the course of human history. From the Americas, Europeans brought back crops that would revolutionize agriculture and nutrition in the Old World. Potatoes, tomatoes, corn, maize, beans, squash, and chocolate, previously unknown in Europe, became staple crops, enriching diets and fueling population growth. The introduction of New World crops had a profound impact on European agriculture, leading to increased yields, new culinary traditions, and the expansion of farmland. The exchange, however, was not without its downsides. Along with beneficial plants and animals, Europeans unwittingly brought with them diseases to which the Native Americans had no immunity. Smallpox, measles, influenza, and other diseases ravaged the Americas, decimating indigenous populations and weakening their ability to resist European encroachment. As European colonies in the Americas grew, so too did the demand for labor to work the land, extract resources, and fuel the burgeoning transatlantic economy. The indigenous populations, decimated by disease and displacement, proved to be an unreliable source of labor. European powers, driven by greed and a belief in their own superiority, turned to a new and horrific source of labor-enslaved Africans. The transatlantic slave trade, one of the darkest chapters in human history, saw millions of Africans forcibly transported across the Atlantic Ocean to labor on plantations in the Americas. This brutal system, driven by profit and fueled by racism, ripped families apart, destroyed lives, and left an indelible stain on the history of the Americas. The introduction of African slavery had a profound impact on the development of the Americas, shaping its economy, its society, and its demographics. The forced labor of enslaved Africans enriched European colonial powers, providing the raw materials, sugar, tobacco, cotton, and other cash crops that fueled the growth of European empires. The seeds of slavery, planted in the 16th century, would grow into a system of racial and economic oppression that would cast a long shadow over the Americas for centuries to come. The legacy of slavery, the systemic racism, the economic disparities, and the ongoing struggle for equality continues to shape the Americas to this day. From 1492 to 1600, the Americas experienced a seismic shift. A quest for a westward route led to a clash of civilizations, forever altering human history. Europeans pursued land and riches, imposing beliefs on indigenous populations. The Columbian Exchange transformed diets and landscapes, but also unleashed devastating diseases. The transatlantic slave trade arose from labor demands, leaving an indelible stain on the Americas. Indigenous peoples showed remarkable resilience, preserving traditions and leaving their mark. The story of colonization is complex and tragic, filled with ambition, greed, and resilience. It shapes our past, present, and future,